Welcome to another chapter of Stop Abusing Yourself with Your Past. Today we're on chapter 9, but before we get started, we're going to see if anybody else is, just joining us. Ease into this really slowly. Remember, if you're enjoying this content, feel free to share it with your friends. If you know somebody who's going through a hard time and they're struggling with resilience, this could be a really good tool for them. So like, share, subscribe if you want more videos like this. Of course, we have a live chat. So Victoria Sibilia, looking forward to tonight's read. She's actually my live audience member tonight. She gets to be here in the studio with us, which is really exciting. And I'm just glad that I can share all of this on YouTube, and it's perennial content. It'll be here forever now, as long as YouTube lets me have a channel. So even if you can't join us for the live, you can always go back and rewatch a chapter if there's something that you missed, or if you need a reminder about gratitude, if you need to remember about forgiveness, if you want to brush up on your mindfulness practices. All of these chapters are going to stay on the YouTube channel, and you have full access to them for free. Don't even have to get the book, but I, of course, recommend getting the book. So week 9 is resilience and weathering the storm. Do not judge me by my success. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again. Nelson Mandela. How resilient are you really? What do you know about resilience? Is it a word that you grew up with, or a new concept to you? Would you be surprised to learn that resilience is attached to shame through self-reflection of a past shameful experience? The definition of resilience is pretty straightforward and tells us everything we need to know about why it's important. It's our ability to bounce back from trauma, stress, and challenging situations. It's how quickly we recover. For some people, this comes easily. It may be easy for some people to shrug off a challenging event in retrospect, but what about in the moment? Can we use resilience during a challenge, and how will that change the way the situation affects us in the long term? We discussed how DAT, dysfunction, anxiety, abuse, and trauma, can have lasting detrimental effects on our well-being. If we could experience something that is perceptibly traumatic, anxious, or stressful, and practice resilience during the experience, as well as afterwards, it can help rewrite what we think about that moment and change the direction of our awareness. Therefore, instead of an external stressor, we fortify ourselves with a strengthening inner knowledge. This is characterized by our ability to bounce back. How quickly we recover is directly correlated to how much resilience we have. Imagine this scenario. You're at work, and you're not doing your job to the best of your ability. Let's say that you're having some trouble at home, which has you distracted and moving a little slower than usual. Rather than being approached with empathy and understanding, your boss comes to you with criticism over your performance. You already felt bad about something else, and now you have another thing to add to the plate of concerns that feels like it's going to bury you if it gets any bigger. This can be overwhelming. A healthy response to a situation like this is, I know I'm not my best today, but I'll be better tomorrow when I've gotten a good night's sleep, or talk to my partner about the thing that was bothering me, or whatever it happens to be that has your attention divided in the first place. This is healthy guilt, as we mentioned in the previous chapter, and is the foundation of resilience. Let's say instead that you take on the thought that I'm failing at home, I'm failing at work, I'm just a complete failure. This is an example of shame, and we discussed that in the previous chapter as well. The definition of resilience is this: the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties or toughness. Example: the often remarkable resilience of so many British institutions. Or the ability of a substance or object to spring back into shape. Elasticity. Example: nylon is excellent in wearability and resilience. Resilience, then, is what shapes us during challenging life events. I'm going to jump into the forest now. Follow me for a moment. Consider, pardon me, a forest of baby trees. They're thriving. They're growing in their perfect habitat and are healthy. A 100-year storm blows through, devastating the landscape. These baby trees are laid flat to the ground, not broken, but bent. Their life force and the will to live is so powerfully strong that they'll continue to reach for the sky, although they've just suffered a severe life-threatening event that has changed them forever, misshapen them even. These stands of trees, 20 years into the future, will all have a bend in their trunks in the same place and are all growing in what appears to be a deformed way. The event has left its mark on them. It reshaped them for the rest of their lives. Is this a trauma? It could be considered so. Some of them will die because of the experience. Not everyone will make it out alive. To the trees that do survive, it was a setback in which they had to put forth a massive amount of energy in repairing the damaged parts of themselves so that they could continue doing what they do best, continue living. They don't look at it all. They don't look at it all. They don't look at it all. They just keep thriving through it, slowly straightening their trunk, reaching for the light of the sun every single day, digging their roots farther toward the water source, and thriving in whatever way they can. As human beings with the capacity to analyze, we take on a lot of misperceptions about our situations, tragic life events, and circumstances that change us. We listen to outside voices and influences that tell us, you've been traumatized, or that we're weakened because of a harsh life experience that tested our resilience. Your ability to bounce back is proof of the fact that you have survived 100% of your experiences that you've already gone through in your life. Not 85, not 30, but a full 100% of your experiences have been survivable because you're still here and you're reading this book. We can put PTSD in this section as a long-term side effect of survivability. This is because as humans, we catalog all of our experiences so we can reorganize patterns. Patterns give us the knowledge of whether something will repeat itself, and if it was an undesirable experience, we'll avoid it at all costs. We will even look for evidence of it arising again so that we can avoid it. However, this is backwards thinking, because whatever we focus on, we get more of. Therefore, we need to be like the tree that is not looking around for another event to break it and is not waiting for the next storm as evidence that the event will repeat in its lifetime. It is also not wary of other potential threats just because it went through one already. It is only looking to the source of life that will make it stronger and able to thrive. Science is beginning to understand that highly resilient people are some of the most optimistic and objective. They have an ability to see what went right and focus on that. They investigate their memories and aren't replaying what was perceptually traumatic, but are seeing how they lived through it and what lessons were available to them to move forward in life with strength and a fortified sense of self. Victimization of ourselves begins with a series of beliefs that we are structurally, foundationally, and ultimately flawed, which will give us some kind of disadvantage in life. These are some of the identification badges we wear to show off to people. Optimistic people rarely feel this way because they live by the understanding that they are adaptable and that all life is suffering anyway. So why make it worse by adding to that suffering by looking at life as though there are no roses among the thorns? And I want to just put in a moment here. Yeomni Park. You can find her on YouTube. Yeomni is Yeomni Park. She is a North Korean refugee that came to America, and her story is pretty incredible. She speaks about resilience, and when she came to America, she speaks to what I just talked about here. had many people telling her that she was traumatized. You're such a victim, and tried to get her to subscribe to the woe is me story. And she said, no, I'm empowered. Like, I made it. I survived this. And now I have the opportunity to thrive rather than be victimized by the traumatic experience that freed me, her and her sister. So I encourage everybody to look her up on YouTube. She's very inspiring, and especially for young people. All life is suffering, is a Buddhist teaching. We must look at this from a realistic vantage point to see it in its proper place. Buddha knew this fundamental law of the universe. We are pleasure-seeking creatures, so the opposite of pleasure would, at least to my understanding, be suffering. Therefore, we resist suffering at all costs because pleasure is so much more pleasurable. Let me remind you, though, that some of our greatest advantages in life have come from our ability to suffer well and live through it. History has also taught us a lot about suffering and how it is advantageous to our survival, regardless of how devastating it was at the time it took place. One example is the utility of living through the Great Depression, which was indeed a tragedy and killed many people. This event produced the kind of parents that wanted better for their children than what they went through. They wanted their children to experience pleasures that were not available to them. So it can be true that hard times make strong people. I will venture to add an opinion to this statement regarding good times. You may notice that we are in good times now. Maybe not right now, but with pleasures available to us at the touch of our fingers, connectivity without leaving our homes, nourishment, and amenities are all abundant, and we have the resources to indulge in pleasurable activities whenever we like. I question then, have good times created weak people? This question plagues me because I see the death rates from suicide on the rise, the mental health crisis growing, and our youth in a state of limbo and confusion over how to proceed in a world that is offering them so much on-demand pleasure. They're overwhelmed. They are perhaps not suffering enough, or in the right ways, not uncomfortable enough to see that the pleasures they are privileged to enjoy have come to them on the backs of a resilient population who came before. If they are not learning resilience through metered suffering in some form, how will they develop problem-solving skills, conflict resolution, and fortification of their inner beings that are constantly reaching toward the sun, i.e., goal-oriented progression? And here's the full quote. Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. And weak men create hard times. From post-apocalyptic novel Those Who Remain by author G. Michael Hoff. Oh, my throat's really dry today, pardon me. Some of the greatest truths that have been revealed by the creatives of our society, some of the greatest truths have been revealed by the creatives of our society. This quote is one of my favorites because it illustrates a cyclical structure that our society and consciousness moves through. It may not be 100% accurate, but stands as an instructive metaphor to help us recognize the patterns of our human drives that fluctuate between pleasure and suffering. It's a guidepost for us all to understand the relationship between the two and why we need both in our daily lives to live our fullest potential. Check on the chat. Nobody else here yet, but that's okay. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Does that make you squirm inside a little bit when I read that? We'll get into why. There are many self-help books that will tell you to think positively, do your affirmations, and focus only on the good so you can live a better life. This is not the message I want to instill in people within these pages. I won't go so far as to say that it is the wrong way to look at it. I believe wholeheartedly that it leaves out a key component of what we need to live a complete life. free of the restrictions of limiting belief structures and social expectations, and reflecting what it means to be a truly divine human being on this planet. When we do not allow ourselves the introspection required to fully embrace our suffering as a part of our human experience, we miss out on some vital universal truths that might just make us the people we want to be and create a world we want to be in. I'll let you think about that one for a minute. I've studied the research on a concept called toxic positivity that has become well known to us today. It is the dismissal of suffering. It is the blatant removal of our innate need to embrace our struggles and encourages us to overlook anything that isn't bringing us pleasure and satisfaction. There is a danger in this kind of thinking. For one, it doesn't give us a chance to process our emotional states in a realistic way. Secondly, it tells us that if we're not happy all the time, then there is something wrong with us. Let's shame ourselves even further, shall we? This is so destructive to our overall well-being because it is, at its root, shaming. How can we be happy all the time? In short, we can't, and we should never think that it's an attainable goal. I want to point out here that we can cultivate happiness, and that we must. The cultivation of happiness is the practice of embracing our struggles and looking at them with a resilient mindset. We know what makes us happy, and often these are circumstantial and external experiences. Happiness is a mindset as well as a practice. We really can choose happy over other feelings that come up. This kind of choosing is what resilience is at its core. It is the choice to be happy, regardless of our situation, but also accepting that our suffering is necessary. It is living through our suffering by developing skills that will fortify our resolve. Just like the trees that were misshapen by the tragedy they suffered, human beings can still reach for higher goals, regardless of what life has dealt them. Ye omni park. I'm going to say it again. It takes practice to get to a place where you can experience hard times and be happy about it. Gratitude is one practice that we have highlighted already and a core tool in the cultivation of happiness because it puts our experiences in proper perspective. Through the suffering, we can still be grateful for what we do have rather than what is currently disturbing our peace. Allowing ourselves to experience uncomfortable emotions and let them run their course is healthy and normal. If we don't give ourselves a chance to feel unrest, upset, unsatisfied, and other overall unpleasant emotional states, we may not be able to feel the ecstasy and bliss of joy, gratitude, and love to its fullest. We are dualistic and we are resilient. We must accept that we will experience hard times and understand that it is temporary. Some research on resilience. Dr. Ginsburg, child pediatrician and human development expert, proposes that there are 7 integral and interrelated components that make up being resilient: competence, confidence, connection, character, contribution, coping, and control. Resilient people are aware of situations, their own emotional reactions, their own behavior, and the behavior of those around them. By remaining aware, they can maintain control of a situation and think of new ways to tackle problems. In many cases, resilient people emerge stronger after such difficulties. According to the research of leading psychologist Susan Kobasa, there are 3 elements that are essential to resilience. Challenge. Resilient people view a difficulty as a challenge, not as a paralyzing event. They look at their failures and mistakes as lessons to be learned from and as opportunities for growth. They don't view them as a negative reflection on their abilities or their self-worth. Commitment. Resilient people are committed to their lives and their goals, and they have a compelling reason to get out of bed in the morning. Commitment isn't just restricted to their work. They commit to their relationships, their friendships, the causes they care about, and their religious or spiritual beliefs. Personal control. Resilient people spend their time and energy focusing on situations and events over which they have control because they put their efforts where they can have the most impact. They feel empowered and confident. Those who spend time worrying about uncontrollable events can often feel lost, helpless, and powerless to act. Another leading psychologist, Dr. Martin Seligman, says the way that we explain setbacks to ourselves is also important in terms of optimism and pessimism rather than resilience. However, the effect is essentially the same. This explanatory style is made up of three main elements: permanence, people who are optimistic and therefore have more resilience see the effects of bad events as temporary rather than permanent. For instance, they might say, "My boss didn't like the work I did on that project," rather than, "My boss never likes my work." Pervasiveness. Resilient people don't let setbacks or bad events affect other unrelated areas of their lives. For instance, they would say, "I'm not very good at this," rather than, "I'm no good at anything." Personalization. People who have resilience don't blame themselves when bad events occur. Instead, they see other people or the circumstances as the cause. For instance, they might say, "I didn't get the support I needed to finish that project successfully," rather than, "I messed that project up because I can't do my job." Dr. Cal Crow, the co-founder and program director of the Center for Learning Connections, identified several further attributes that are common in resilient people. Resilient people have a positive image of the future. That is, they maintain a positive outlook and envision brighter days ahead. Resilient people have solid goals and a desire to achieve those goals. Resilient people are empathetic and compassionate. However, they don't waste time worrying about what others think of them. They maintain healthy relationships, but don't bow to peer pressure. Resilient people never think of themselves as victims. And we talked about this in another chapter, taking it in and being responsible for your own participation in every event that you have in your life. They focus their time and energy on changing the things that they can control. How we view adversity and stress strongly affects how we succeed, and this is one of the most significant reasons that having a resilient mindset is so important. How do we implement it all? The fact remains that we're going to fail from time to time. It's an inevitable part of living that we make mistakes and occasionally fall flat on our faces. The only way to avoid this is to live a shuttered and meager existence, never trying anything new or taking risks. Embracing suffering and being compassionate with ourselves is the most useful way to embody a lifelong sense of resilience so that we can come through any struggle and overcome a defeat with grace and stability. The components listed by Susan Kobasa illustrate all the necessary parts that make up the whole in understanding what exactly we need to do to execute this in our daily lives. And now for a personal story. In July of 2018, I met the love of my life. This was a beautiful time to be celebrated. The pleasure that came of this meeting, the creative abundance that flowed out of both of us was prolific and powerful. It was one of the most wonderful times I can recount. Rewind just 3 months earlier to April, and I was reaching out to my ex to see if we could spark a relationship after 7 years of separation. Are any of you cringing yet? Good. Is the line reaching out to my ex. We dated for only a couple of months, and although it was good, I knew with a heavy heart that I had made a terrible mistake. I had grown during that time apart and done severe pruning work on my mind garden so that I could be a better person than I had been in our relationship of 5 years. We'd gone through an unofficial marriage ceremony, had a son, and were highly destructive, dysfunctional time together. Or if we were of truly loving, our interactions were bringing out the worst in each of us that I had done the work to overcome been with before. I had to tell him that. It was so hard to express that I was not the same person and that I could not go back into a relationship with him and that I had made a mistake in trying. I apologized for my misperception and I moved on. He was unable to move on. In September, he learned that I had found a new partner. He was angry at first and then wrathful. In November of 2018, we went to court. He filed many false accusations against myself and my family, and it nearly tore us apart. William, my partner, who I've mentioned several times already, took this in stride. His compassion for the situation and his love for me and my family shone through in every action he took during this incredibly hard time. It traumatized us all while we're going through the hardest parts of it. I will spare you the goriest details, just know that although it tested all of us in many ways that we could not ever have anticipated, we've all grown stronger together because of the resilience we created through intentional practices. I made sure to engage my children in fun activities, even when I was so stressed with paperwork, court dates, the uncertainty of possibly losing my son, my mother being forced to leave her home for a year over false and heinous accusations, and the constant threat of my ex and his aggressive verbal attacks and accusations against me. We still made life good. We intentionally found pleasurable moments to fill the crevices of our suffering so that we could soften the blow, cushion the hard edges closing in on us, and buffer the pain. It felt like a band-aid to a severed limb, but it worked. Every time we countered distress and pain with satisfying activities and connective moments, we all released some of the fear and anxiety of the overall experience. It was temporary, but effective. This process of uncertainty lasted for 4 years. After the court ruling was in place, we still had to interact with my ex as outlined by the judge. After all, he's still the father of my son, and it was determined that to maintain a meaningful connection between them, they needed time devoted to that. So, I was still communicating over email, arranging parenting time, and discussing our son's needs. The PTSD I suffered lasted through 2021, when I finally put my foot down, gathered up all the evidence of his inflammatory interactions, and went back to court for a final time. I had reached a point where I couldn't even open one of his emails without experiencing a panic attack. I knew this was unacceptable and that I needed to get a grip on my own reactivity. I chose to see it differently. Instead of valuing anything he said to me, mostly about what a terrible mother and disgraceful human being I am, I was able to empower myself to reach out to the court system on my own. With the help of a lawyer, the support of my partner and family, and the resilience I had gained from the first experience, I went into it with an inner strength that fueled every action I took to end this destructive pattern of communication once and for all. My poor lawyer. I have a great deal of empathy for him as I tried to convey from the very beginning just how volatile this situation would be. He initially expressed how he was fortified to handle it from a professional standpoint, but as the case progressed, he became more and more flustered as everything I pointed out to him began playing itself out. He told me that my ex was the most belligerent individual he had ever experienced in a personal or professional setting. "I know. I tried to tell you," was all I could say. I understood what we were dealing with, and it had nearly broken us the first time round, but it hadn't. My lawyer also kept wondering why the court system was responding the way it was, which I had expected as well, given the history of our case. Regardless of my ex's blatant belligerent behavior, The judges overlooked much of it and moved forward as if it were perfectly normal to get screamed at in their own courtrooms. September of 2022 was our last court date, so this is still quite fresh in my experience. As of the writing of the book, I am now fully empowered in my ability to navigate my feelings regarding my ex. I no longer have the PTSD rise within me when a communication is made, which is rare these days, if at all. I no longer sink into anxiety over what might happen, over the uncertainty and danger that I felt would destroy us all. I am at peace, knowing that I did everything I could, even throwing a ridiculous amount of money at it, and that I can rest easily because I showed up, did the work, made no excuses, and pressed forward in the knowledge that I was strong enough to carry the weight of returning to court for my family and for our future. I survived it, and so did everyone else. Therefore, my survival rate is still at 100%, and my resilience is strengthened. The bonus of this is that I'm more peaceful, loving, and kind, instead of embittered. Is this a victory? No. In my experience on this earth, I have consistently been an advocate for the men. My studies in reading The Myth of Male Power by Warren Farrell, another book I highly recommend. It was written in 1993, but it's just as true, if not more, today. I read that and other works that highlight the plight of men in the family judicial system. I had determined to never create a debt slave out of my children's father. The fact that my ex, however terrible his behaviors and actions have been, is now a debt slave of the state for the rest of his life, because he will likely never pay off the money the state determined was appropriate because of my actions. This is a bittersweet win. On the one hand, my son will be provided for in the way he deserves to be, and financial opportunities will now be available to him that were not previously. On the other hand, my ex now lives in the statistics of fathers who have had their lives ruined by the judicial system that enslaves them financially. I do not feel good about this. I am the hero and the villain, embodied in one determined choice, made for the safety and sake of my family. My final thought is this. I include my ex in my gratitude practice now, when I used to need to hate him. How this changes the landscape of your mental garden. Any gardener will tell you that when a storm is approaching and your fruit trees are blossoming, you must protect them, or they won't bear fruit. If a flood is on the way, sandbags are a useful method of deterring water that could wipe out a full year's crop. If frost is imminent and you have immature tomato plants, the wall of water can be put over them to keep them from freezing. Gardeners deal with a wide range of adversity in ensuring the success of their crops. They use a variety of methods depending on the situation they need to overcome. Your mind garden is fraught with all kinds of challenges that will test your resolve in reaching the outcome you desire. If you slack in one place, the consequences will be visible and oftentimes immediate. The long-term effects mean more work for you because the process of rebuilding is harder than the process of preventing. Let me read that again. The process of rebuilding is often harder than the process of preventing. Resilience is not only the way your plants weather adversity, but the preparation you give them to weather it well. Your garden is teeming with life, and it can be easy to overlook an important step in the process, creating setbacks. I will confess that in the process of learning, I have personally killed more plants than I have successfully grown. I mean this in the most literal way. I have planted so many seeds, tried to grow trees and other things, and a lot of them, in fact. You could say perhaps that I've failed a lot. Instead of seeing this failure as a reason to stop trying, I troubleshoot what potentially went wrong and make appropriate adjustments the next time around. I have a dream to plant a forest on our land. Do you know how many trees make up an entire forest? Neither do I. I know it's a lot, though. Therefore, to meet that goal, I need to keep going every single day. I can't take I can't just take a day off from watering my seedlings because I didn't feel like it, or I was sick, or I thought that something else would be more satisfying in the moment. I have an aim that I'm shooting for, a goal that requires the proper dedication and commitment. This means that I must be unwavering in my approach to seeing that goal through. When I plant a tree and the cows eat it, it's dead. Start over. However, there will be a forest. It's up to me, and only me, if that's what my goal is, to keep planting until I'm standing under the canopy of tall trees with leaves filtering sunlight through to the earth at my feet. This is my truth. I can see myself standing underneath them, feeling the shade of their magnificent canopy and bathing in the satisfaction of my ongoing effort. I may never see some of these trees reach maturity, but that's not the goal. The goal is only to plant a forest, and I'm already doing the work today to make that a reality in some unnamed future. And to that, since my mom is part of our live audience today, I can tell you this. We got to harvest oak acorns and locust tree seed pods. We did that today because my mom also shares this goal with me. And we both are doing this together. My partner now is involved as well. And this year has been so rewarding. We've learned so much more. And like I said, like I've killed more things than I've grown. Our ratios are starting to invert, and our success rate is getting higher because instead of stopping at the first signs of failure, we learned better skills. We worked together. We mastermind what the problem was. And since this is the goal and it's an unwavering goal, well, there must be a way to achieve it. It's the only outcome that's possible. We don't leave ourselves a back door. There's no room for failure. You just keep planting more. Out of somewhere around 600 acorns, we got 35 trees. I'm okay with that. So we're going to do it differently. We're going to plant more acorns this year. And we have 35 trees going into next year. That's more than we had when we started. So that's the incremental progress. You know, that's what keeps you going. You just don't ever stop if it's a goal that means that much to you. So I just wanted to share that because it's exciting. So your mind is this way too. When you commit yourself to the goal of tending your mind garden as the focus of your desire, the results within you become tangible. You may not even see the progress you've made externally, but those around you will look upon you and make comments like, your skin is clearer, your eyes are shining. Did you lose weight? Even if you haven't. What's different about you? Wow, you look really good today. These are all recognitions from the external world that your mental garden is flourishing. Is that word? Take them for what they are. Acknowledge them and use them to your benefit so you can see the progress that you're making through the eyes of others. We are not experiencing life in a vacuum, and we need this confirmation from the universe that we're succeeding. External validation in this form can be the most useful because we're not seeking it out. It shows up only as a reflection of what we're doing for ourselves. It sends a visible ripple into the world and sets a shining example to others around us that internal peace is possible, powerful, and has worldly impact on our nearby environments. I'm adding an additional quote here because I feel it represents the core of what I'm trying to convey in this entire chapter. To suffer terribly and to know yourself as the cause, that is hell. Jordan Peterson, from the book 12 Rules of Life, An Antidote to Chaos. So there's a lot of things that require us to be resilient. There are a lot of worldly events taking place right now, a lot of physical ailments, disease. So many people are suffering, and in real ways. Like, let's not diminish this. People are suffering in very real ways. So building our resilience, bouncing back from those things, taking on the next challenge head on, because they're never going to stop coming. That's the part that I think is most important for everyone to understand. Like, as long as we're alive, we're going to continue to be put face to face with these daily challenges. We work, we have families, we have all of our personal things. Like, what are your dreams and goals? Do you even know? Have you been able to sit with yourself and decide what it is you want to do? Do you have a purpose, which we'll get into in the next chapter? Because purpose is just as important as having the commitment to it. You've got to have something you're aiming at, right? And being able to bounce back from things that are hard can give you the motivation and momentum you need to aim straighter. That's all I wanted to say about that. So let's get on to the practices. So there's just a few, and they're pretty simple. So we're going to go through some strength training. So we did pruning, we dug holes, we weeded our garden. Well, we're going to do some strength training right now. Resilience practice and tools to weather the storm. So we're going to start with a journal practice. Write out one story in your life that was impactful in a disempowering way that still affects you now. Like, you got to read my story. It doesn't affect me now, but it did. Regardless of how many years have passed, it doesn't matter. Just pick one. Find one that still lingers in the back of your mind. In the last chapter, we talked about our stories and the ones that we tell. So I know you've got them in there. Flesh it out and get the details of it on paper in your journal. The more detail you use, the better, because this will aid you in determining how to weather a future storm that may arise. So, adding to that, this story can have a happy ending, and you'll be creating the new and empowering ending by writing out some of the practices that are highlighted in this chapter that you can use to reframe the story you just wrote. Give it time to evolve. It may not come to you immediately. This will be an ongoing practice of rereading your story every day for the next week and picking out insights from it that you can use to develop a new outlook on what it can mean to you now. You have the power to use the experience to your benefit instead of your detriment moving forward. So, to give you a really good example, we'll go back to my story. So, talked about how I tried to explain to the lawyer just exactly what he was getting into. And, he's getting more and more frustrated. And I'm just like, I know. I could have, instead of saying that, I could have been like breaking down in tears and having it be so challenging that I'm just like, I know exactly how horrible he is, and that's why we're struggling so bad, and, play the victim card. So in that story, I had already handled it well, but pick out certain lines that kind of hit, when you read them, and you'll feel it when you read it. And then think of either how you handled that well in the moment, or even rewrite it. How could I have handled that better? Like, if this situation never happened again, which hopefully it will never will, what would have been a better ending to that? What would have been a better response rather than a bad reaction? So just try that. Pick one story, break it down, find your lines, and add things to it. Make comments on it. How do you feel about that story or certain parts of that story? One particular sentence. Oh, that just stabs me in the chest. Write that out. What are your feelings about the stories that you're telling? Because most likely the people that you're telling them to, they're also experiencing some of those tragic, inflamed emotional states or confusion, because they may have no reference to understand what you're even talking about. So in the stories that you share, you never know how they're going to be received. You kind of have to get down to the motivations of why you're telling them and what they mean for you. And that's what that practice is all about. So this one's optional. The art of resilience, redefining your inner strength. What situations are you prone to internalize, and how have they misshapen you, like those trees? These can be as simple as not getting a text back from a friend, or as complicated as a childhood issue that has left a kink in your growth somewhere. It doesn't matter about the severity of an experience. It's gauged on the severity of your feeling of the experience. Where you hold the most extreme feelings is where resilience is lacking. For me, it's about my integrity. Like if somebody questions my integrity, or like they'll ask me, did you do this for this reason? And sometimes I look at them and I'm like, where did that even come from? Like my drive and motivation was this, like my integrity was here, and you're trying to say that it was over here somewhere. That flares me up so strong. It's a nice little jingle. So yeah, I don't have as much resilience in my integrity because for many years I didn't trust myself to make good decisions. So that's what I'm working on. Another optional journal prompt. Where is your sun? Meaning, what do you do for yourself that has you striving toward a satisfying goal that can get you out of the mindset that you've experienced a trauma that is breaking rather than simply bending you? These are the practices you do that can pull you out of extreme emotional states. These self-soothing acts and goal-oriented tasks are the sunshine that provide context to your suffering. Praise them and bring awareness to them so you can use them more intentionally. Emotional regulation begins with the knowledge of how to alchemize your experiences. So what feels good? And not just eating that donut, because we've talked about that. But what really feels good? What do you do that can pull you right out of a bad state of thinking? Interrupt those intrusive thoughts, make you aware of your cognitive distortions. We don't talk about that much in this book, but it's worth mentioning that we have a lot of cognitive distortions. So latch on to those things that you can do in the moment that bring you out, whether it's your gratitude practice, whether it's being mindful and doing the CBT, the CMT, where you're saying, there's a camera in front of me. I have a book in my hand. This is my body. I'm so grateful for my legs. I would really miss them if they were gone. Making your tea drinking practice. I am drinking this tea. The steam is warm on my face. Washing your dishes. Those are things that pull you back into your now and can interrupt the pattern that ramps you up so high that you can't even function properly. We're not in a reasonable state when we're there. And I wanted to leave you with this quote because this was part of the resilience part of Brene Brown's Gifts of Imperfection. She said this. So I hear myself, and I did an eyeball because I also see myself. And her quote is, "We are broken open or we willfully shed." Just like any animal that emerges from an egg, just like a butterfly that has to turn into soup in their cocoon. And if we try and help them come out of that and spread their wings for them, they will be misshapen and they'll never fly. They have to be broken out from within. You have to break out, literally and metaphorically, break out of those cycles that are holding you back, of those thought patterns that are detrimental to you, of every place that you demean and demoralize, betray ourselves, gaslight ourselves. We're really good at that. So it's been a blessing to be able to share all of this with you. Chapter 9 was really a powerful read. I think everybody could use more resilience right now. And again, thank you for joining us. If you liked this, if it resonated with you, please share it with your friends, especially those who are struggling. We'll be back in 2 weeks to read chapter 10. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Blessings, my friends. Until next time.